Good morning. My name's Annette Litherland. I'm the Regional Coordinator for NZ Landcare Trust. So this particular section is on catchment groups. I'll flick through this really quickly because I want to spend more time on how you would start a catchment group and how you would get them going. A catchment group is, firstly, it's a group of people, and those people live in a defined area, and they have a focus on improving their water quality. And I like to include the schools and things and part of that as well, so it's intergenerational, because if you're going to look after the water, it has to be done over many generations. Key component of it is it's set up by landowners, run by landowners, it's run by leaders of the landowners, and that is always the limitation to starting a group, is, in my mind, is finding those people. But then there's a whole wrap of agencies that run around these and support these catchment groups, and that's, the council's always involved. That's part of my role, is I can be asked to come in and help support a catchment group from NZ Landcare Trust. There's farm organisations, the ones that have beef and lamb in there. We have Fonterra, we have Dairy NZ, and there's often research organisations like Cawthron is going to become involved in some of ours. Iwi is often involved, and local businesses and schools, and then there's the whole funding organisations. But no catchment group looks the same. It looks different in every different catchment. So when you have a group of landowners getting together for a specific issue, it always ends up by looking different. So there's no one way. This is a map of the catchment groups that are supported by NZ Landcare Trust, and I'm sure there's others beyond that, but this is the data that I had to hand. It's over 5 million hectares. It's 20% of New Zealand land area. The particular one that I am very envious of is this one down in Southland. There's 85% of the land area is now in organised catchment groups. Some of our catchment groups in the top of the south are not actually on there yet, but in the top of the south we have one operating in the Motupipi, one in the Sherry River, one in the Wakapuaka, just started one in the Mutri, and we're just trying to reinstate the one in the Wairoa. And others that are potentially in the pipeline that's slightly being talked about is the Motueka River, but hopefully there'll be some as we progress and we end up looking a bit more like Southland. The difference between us and the other regions is that currently there is no real regulation imposed on landowners around water quality, like there are in some of these other regions. And this is because our water quality is still pretty good. We have 50% of our land area that is coming out of native bush. So it's a real opportunity for this region. So what value are they? It's about community. You can't actually achieve anything with changing a whole waterway without the whole community being involved. They create a collective vision. It's a vision that's local. And it's about increasing understanding. What are the issues? Do we need more measurements? Do we need the council to come along and talk about what their water quality measurements are? Are there different measurements that need to be taken? A lot of the big groups in other parts of the country do their own testing. It's about trust. You know, it's we all have to start working together as Kiwis and trust each other to try and bring that in. And we need to work with the landowners, and we need to work with all the agencies. And so it's something that we all start working on together. And I've spent a bit of time working on a farm, and one of the biggest issues is motivation. And that's not because you're not motivated, it's because you're working so goddamn hard. And what can you add on to take that next step to plant a few more trees and things? It really comes from motivation. And motivation also comes from knowing what you're going to do, and is it going to make a difference? So that's a huge thing of the catchment groups, is providing that motivation and support for each other. And you start developing leaders within the community, and that's a key part, and champions. And a catchment group is often very practical, and that's what I expect to see today. There'll be a lot of scientists presenting some ideas, and then there'll be some practical people working out how they're actually going to make that work on their properties. It's a voice, too. You have a much more powerful voice coming from a catchment than you would as an individual. It's an awesome way to get resources. We've just managed to get funding for 16,000 trees and some wetlands in the Motupipi catchment, because the farmers provided us with what they wanted, and then we went out and tried to get some funding for them. Some of them in other regions have some structure. They become their own entity. They become a incorporated society to go and get their own funding. And the Motupipi, the funding's going via Tasman Environmental Trust. So that's how that's been worked. And it's about the future. It's about getting ready for the future that we know is coming. And so if we can start moving in the direction that we want, and the jump when the healthy waters come in won't necessarily be so big. And it's all about the story. I hear farmers say over and over and over again, we need the rest of the community to tell them the story of what we're doing, what incredible things we've already done. So it's all about telling that story, and it's about involving the community. These are some quotes that I've had from people that have been in the catchment that I've picked up as I've gone along. So we suddenly felt as though we belonged to a friendly, caring community. Amazing how a catchment and the water that flows through it connects us all. So what sort of things do catchment groups do? They do water quality measurements. They get their own analysis. We'll see the Pumahaka one here has been collecting their own water ones. You do catchment maps. This is often what I do. And I have to report on key performance indicators. So you can track to see, how are you improving? Is there more fencing going on? How many trees have been planted? And so it makes a very cohesive story for the catchment. It's about getting land and environment plans. Merca's doing land and environment plans for the Motupipi and the Raipuloras from her whole farm plans for Fonterra. We've got funding to get land and environment plans done for the farmers in the Sherry River. It's about tree growing and planting and weed control and fencing, all of those activities. A lot of the catchments start producing their own trees or getting funding for their own trees. They start pest control, bird and fish monitoring. As farmers share good management practices with each other, and we start getting those taken up. There was a really good workshop that Tom from Beef and Lamb, who's filming this, did in the region last week. It seems like just a little while ago, where Trevor and Tom and Beef and Lamb and a combined Dairy NZ went around and did a water quality, good management practice on winter practicing right through the region. There was four workshops. There was a minimum of 30 farmers there at each workshop. So farmers are really working on taking on good management practices. Kathy's place was one of the venues. And then they also have Facebook pages, articles, videos, field days, all of those things. Some of them start constructing sediment dams and wetlands, and they put in their funding applications and they have inputs into policies. Here's another thing that this particular landowner, it's a picture of her property, I heard her say, this is the first time I've sat down with my neighbour and discussed the stream that we share and what we're both doing to improve it. As you go. So somebody got an idea for what would create a spark to start a catchment group. So that was from the Motupipi catchment, the indignation of having your river included on MFE's worst rivers list. And yes. And that's a spark for many catchments. Suddenly they've been told that, they've got really poor water quality.
Could it also be the realisation that your activity is actually having an effect on your river?
Yep. Yes. Realisation that you're having an... Yes, absolutely. There's quite a few catchments when I come out and see my property and I want to start a catchment group. So that's how the mootery started. One telephone call from one landowner saying, let's do this. That was a spark. There's actually no macroinvertebrates of the right species living under it. What else? What started the Oriri?
It was a cross-industry conflict between the shellfish industry out on the sea and the farmers on the land.
Yeah. So the Oriri, the shellfish people were finding E. coli blooms out around their shellfish and they couldn't harvest. And so the farmers were a little bit horrified that they were affecting somebody else's livelihood. And they've made amazing improvements in that. Any others? Sign you up for a Motueka River catchment? Exactly. So it's the thought of this healthy waters being applied and getting a voice. That will definitely be a hope in this region, a trigger for creating more catchment groups. So the next step is you've got the spark and you're sitting there. Now you need a small group of leaders. Has anyone got any experience in how you find a small group of leaders in a catchment? We heard that they came to Landcare Trust because they knew that they would take the pressure off, so they came and tapped. You said that it's a lot easier to get leaders if you're dealing with a small group. So he said, 25 people might be good, and then you can find a leader that's saying, okay, these are all my neighbours and around me, I'm willing to be a little bit of a leader in that little catchment. So what we've done in some catchments is divided people up in sub-catchments and then said, please, can you provide us with a leader? And so somebody stepped forward. So that's the example that I have. Mirka, you've rung up farmers and said...
I think that...
Yep, so go on. First week I was working for Landcare Trust, Barbara took me into a car and said, we're just going to drive in and see who's home. Yeah, I haven't done it since, Barbara. I need to keep doing it. But yeah, it's trying to get the leaders there. And then you have to build support. Some of the catchments, Roy, you've done it, being one of our leaders, you've built support in your catchment. How do you go about it?
Yeah, probably passing on the information that we get from the likes of you guys, and just trying to keep that contact with the other farmers in the valley.
Yep.
But it's not easy, and it's probably got a bit harder in the last few years when there's so many other issues sort of coming at the farming industry. And for a valley like ours that's been involved in it for a long time, it's to keep that interest, and that's really, really hard to do where people sort of start to feel they're over it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have a goal to achieve, and if you think you've achieved it, even if it doesn't prove that you have, like long term, they felt, well, they've given it a good go. And yeah, it's hard to keep that motivation going.
It's hard to keep the motivation. It's a long-term thing to improve water quality for sure. There can be simple things like articles in the newspapers, and once again involving the schools. But also, I think, getting some action on the ground, getting some visible things that are there that you can see, some trees for the farmers and stuff. So, we want to plan all the vision and everything, but at the same time, you've got to have some runs on the board, otherwise why would you be involved in this? There has to be some benefit. And building some sort of momentum and, holding people like me to account. You said you were going to do this, this and this, and where have you done? Roy's very good at that. He rings me up, Annette, have we made any progress? So all that's part of building support. People will be involved if they feel like it's actually achieving something. Susan, you have had a phenomenal success in support in the Waka Puaka with the lifestylers. How did you do that?
Thanks. As a landowner, I think the support has come from within. it's helping people with what it is that they want to achieve on their land and
Absolutely.
supporting them to do it.
Yes.
As a landowner, what have you found helpful? The Waka is less of a formal catchment group than it is a
it's unique.
collective of people who are all trying to work towards what they envisage.
In my case, I had personal interest in doing the kind of thing that the council was promoting, so it was a no-brainer for me. It just fitted. It was what I wanted to do, so I guess that's what you were saying.
Yeah, so helping people do what they want to do. And that's so true of farmers. You know, at the Motopipi, we sat down and asked them, what would you like to do? Well, I'd like to plant here, I'd like to do this, I'd like to get some water in there. And so that's all we're trying to do, is help support them to what they want to do. So that's a really good idea. Jim.
Formalize that a bit. I think what we're saying is that we want to identify some clear objectives that people can aim for, and then that might help to keep the motivation as well, because you've got a goal there, and if you can track your progress towards that goal, that should help you keep you motivated as well. You know you're making progress, you've got some clear plans on how you're going to do it. But if you haven't got a clear idea of why you're there, what you're trying to achieve, then it's hard to build that support and keep the momentum.
Yep, our goals, visions, where you're going to, absolutely.
A lot of council involvement. We had that feeling that we were empowering our valley over the future of it, as far as being ahead of any regulation and not needing to be regulated because we were actually dealing with the issue. I think right at the moment there's that feeling that, we've lost that empowerment.
Yes. Hopefully the 17,500 submissions to the Healthy Waters will get that message. Because one of the outcomes of the Healthy Waters in the Sherry is we had all the farmers lined up to do the land and environment plans that were going to be funded by the council to deal with E. coli or faecal microbes. And one farmer pulled out. He says, look, there's no point me doing anything because I don't know what the Healthy Waters is going to be in the future, and I might have to start again. So we're trying to tell him, well, let's carry on, and by the time we get there it might be sorted. So, yep. So you have to come from a common knowledge platform, and you're going to get a lot of that today from the water scientists, from councils, presenting what they know about the water. So there's lots of common knowledge there. So that would be sort of water quality, and you may actually find out that you don't know the cause, and you might need to go and do some more measurements. And we've got some data here from the Waka to show, creating that knowledge platform, really find out what the issue is. But it can also be a knowledge platform for the people that live in the river. They know the most about the river and what the issues are and where they are. And so it's collecting that common knowledge so everybody's working on the same page. And here is Jim's define the vision, outcomes and goals and action plans. So that's a really important part in the catchment group. And we generally try to do that with the leaders of the group, not the whole community. But if you're a relatively small group, like there's 2,700 landowners in the Muteri catchment. Trying to set down that number of people and decide what the vision and outcomes and goals might be, very difficult. Very easy in the Sherry River, much smaller catchment. So you can define those sorts of things and where we're going to. And then, this is my particular crucial thing, there must be actions, because farmers and landowners are doers. You might have all the fancy words in the book of your goals and visions, but you actually have to do stuff, otherwise they lose interest. So you have to have actions that are going to be undertaken. And all agree what those actions are and working towards them. And then actually do it. So what sort of stuff have they done, Roy, in the Sherry River? If you want to say 5 or 6 things that you've actually done.
Oh, there's been a lot of bridges put up, a lot of riparian planting done, a lot of fencing, and probably just a lot of knowledge gained on the way we farm. That's probably the biggest thing too, getting that knowledge, and that's where the science that's been involved in it has been really important.
Yep. And in the Sherry River, just to put it in context of the catchments that we're wanting to deal with, the Sherry River has made big improvements in reducing E. coli, but we've now just got to a plateau, and we really need your help of the people in here to work out what to do next, to just get us up into the green band of the river. And that's what we want to do for our rivers in the Wakapuaka as well, and the Motupipi as well. Once again, the Motupipi's made some great improvements and reductions of E. coli, which Trevor will tell you all about. And then step 8 is to review, monitor, document progress. You have to be able to say what you've done, tell your stories, highlight the successes, and reassess as you go along. So that is, you've got there how to create a catchment group. You've made some opportunities to make some notes. There's actually a fully filled out form that was a combined effort from Beef and Lamb New Zealand and New Zealand Landcare Trust up there. If you want to pick in their ideas as well. This one's for Peter. So this is something I heard a farmer say in the Te Hoia Pelorus catchment. I came into this meeting thinking this is from a farmer. I came into this meeting thinking you were all out to get us. Now I see that you're working alongside us. All the farmers need to hear this. So we're all in the same waka. We're all trying to improve water quality from different regions, different ways and different things, and with different outcomes, but we're all trying to achieve the same goal. And so when we're divided, you can achieve very little, but together we can achieve a lot, and we can all work alongside each other. So some other things around catchment groups. Think about the structure. Do you need a bank account? Is it an incorporated society or a charitable trust? As I say, everyone's unique on how we actually work out how you find the funding. Now, this is something I really struggle with. The new catchment groups could start when having some of those structures around it, then we could have a lot more. Otherwise, it's limited by somebody having to do all those sorts of things. So that was just a personal fee. And some groups fund themselves, and you'll hear about that with the Pumahaka. They have subscriptions. The Rangatiki River, which I don't know if you're aware of in the North Island, has just started a catchment group. It's huge. Thousands of farmers in the Rangatiki catchment, and they all pay a subscription fee, which is funded themselves to do all the measurements and things that they wanted to do. So some do that, some don't. Some have a coordinator, and that can be me or it can be somebody else. If you get funding, you can actually get a paid coordinator, or there may be somebody within the council that might be willing to do that, I don't know. But it's good to have somebody that's accountable. Another one from the Wakapuaka catchment. We've lived here for 25 years and have never seen this level of energy and enthusiasm in the community for improving the environment. This is, so you understand what he was talking about. So that's around colossal tree planting. Susan's spearheaded a project that's got over 30,000 trees planted in the Wakapuaka catchment last winter by landowners, which is phenomenal. Phenomenal amount of work going in there. Oh, and we're on a wave. Right, so catchment groups are all about capturing hearts and minds of the landowners, but also the community that are around them to support them in what they're trying to do. And it's all about Kiwi doing what we do best and getting on and solving the problem and working together to do that and not fighting amongst each other. We've got to improve the water quality in the urban streams. We've got to help the farmers improve the water quality in the rural streams. And we've got to stop blaming each other in conflict, because one thing I've noticed is standing here looking at the rest of the world, if you're in conflict, you achieve nothing. So it's actually working together that actually achieves things. And so that's what we want to try to do in these catchments.